very early days of film, everything was done with analog optical, both the original premixing and the original recording, because there was no magnetic in the 30s. By the time I got involved started taking interest in the late 60s, early 70s, the technique was to record location stuff on quarter-inch tape, analog and Nagra, and then a multitude of premixes and music would be recorded on tape, and then 35mm magnetic, what we call full coat, which is 35mm sprocketed film but with oxide all the way across. And a lot of tracks would be mixed together and copied, doing premixes like a fir tree, until finally a master would get copied onto an analog optical negative, which then in turn would get printed onto the release prints in the theaters. Now the problem with the sound quality dates back to the 30s, when in the 30s power was expensive and wood was cheap. As a result, the loudspeakers were made to be very efficient in order to save power, because vacuum tubes were unbelievably expensive. 15 watts was considered to be a big power amp in those days. So the speakers had to be really efficient, and as a result they didn't sound too good. You would get a characteristic that looked, I refer to it as the Paramount trademark. It was like two mountains like this, a high frequency unit and a low frequency unit, very, very warped. And the mixers would try and compensate for this bad loudspeaker system, stuck behind a screen as best they could, which meant they would raise the highs up significantly on the console to try and compensate for the drooping high frequency response coming from the loudspeaker. And that raising of the highs meant there was a lot of distortion on the magnetic elements before you get to the film. So you finish up with high noise because of the number of generations, high distortion, and then you finish up on a loudspeaker that's of very poor quality in terms of today's standards. So to get film sound to improve was a lot more than just adding noise reduction. You had to grapple with this issue of how the whole process was working. That was a lengthy program for us, lasted 3, 4, 5 years really, before we managed to get people to first of all start using equalizers. That was the first product we built at Dolby that was not just noise reduction, was a third octave equalizer to try and straighten out the loudspeaker response. Luckily, because the loudspeaker was so efficient, there was the capability of equalizing it. If the loudspeaker had been less efficient, it might have been more difficult to equalize it out. So we discovered that even these rather primitive multicellular horns could be equalized to get them to sound much better, much flatter. As you flatten out the loudspeaker, less equalization is required in the mix. So as a result, there is a lower distortion. But by token of the fact that you're raising the highs on the loudspeaker to get a better frequency response, up comes the hiss, so noise reduction becomes the key that makes the whole package possible.